Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. In a video I did recently, I titled it Piracy is Completely Justified. Lewis tries Netflix and remembers why. In this video, I have decided that since I am a grown-ass man, I have a job, I have a business, I have a life, I have responsibilities, that $22 for content that I might enjoy is really not an issue for me anymore. When I was 12 years old and I was washing people's bikes for $1 to get money to pay for things like SUSE Linux and Best Buy back in 2001, I did not have the ability to buy things online because buying things online required a credit card or a debit card or many other things that usually you just don't issue to a 12-year-old. So back then, I may have went to the high seas for this content. But since I am an adult, I paid for the content because I thought it was valuable to me. After paying for the content, I noticed that there was an option to pay extra for 4K, and once I paid extra for the 4K, I realized that I was getting a really low-quality stream. I decided to look into it, and I saw that, in spite of the fact that I have a processor with an over 27,000 CPU benchmark score, an RTX 2080 graphics card, 32 gigabytes of RAM, an NVMe SSD, and a beautiful 4K display with an HDMI 2.0 cable, I was getting 720p, not just 720p, but low bitrate 720p. That was horribly blocky. I looked into it a little bit and realized that apparently, in spite of the fact that my hardware is completely capable of playing back 4K video, it is capable of encoding 4K video with H.265 high settings at over real time. I can't get served that stream. Not because my hardware is not capable of playing it, but because Netflix has placed arbitrary limitations that do not benefit me, that have no technical reason for being there, so that they can have more control over the entire system. I have to use their operating system with their browser, with a monitor and a graphics card that supports their particular system, with a GPU driver that supports their copy protection, and I can't, in some cases, you can't even use an AMD processor. You have to be using a processor that from a brand that they like. And many people commented that this is a skill issue. You should have done your research before paying for this content, even though you wouldn't have to do any research if you went to the high seas. As long as your computer is capable of playing it, it plays. I don't do research when I'm paying you for a luxury service. I'm not doing that. Like when I go to Fogo de Chao or SP Steakhouse, let's just use SP because SP is much better than Fogo de shit. When I go to SP Steakhouse, I'm paying $160 for dinner. When I do that, I'm not doing research on how long I need to cook the filet mignon for. That's what I'm paying you for the experience. But whatever, I didn't do the research to figure out that nowhere on the page where they're upselling me to 4K do they mention any of these arbitrary limitations that have nothing to do with my hardware's capability of decoding 4K video. Fine. Let's talk about a different case. Sony steals customers' purchased content. Piracy is completely justified. In this case, Sony and Discovery have decided that content that used to be available to you is no longer going to be available to you. You purchased it, according to their own words on PlayStation.com. You purchased this to be able to view it with your Sony device and your Sony software. In this case, you are... Clinty, if you want to be here, jump up. I've made stairs for you, boy. Clinty, you want to be here? You jump up. Clinty? In this case, you are using both the hardware and the software that has been provided to you by the content provider. So Sony is providing the streaming service, Sony is providing the hardware, Sony's providing the software. This should just work at this point. And in spite of that, people can just take back what you had purchased. Again, you know, I understand the concept of a library. I go into the library, books may be available today that are not available tomorrow. The selection's always changing, but when I purchase something from that library, when they have a rack up front of stuff that they're getting rid of for a fundraiser or whatever, and I purchase a book from that library, I do not expect that they can come into my house and take that book away. Because they use the word purchase, and because before lawyers that write 180-page fuck-ass EULAs to rob honest working people blind ran the country, we had a meaning to the word purchase. And the word purchase did not mean that you're purchasing a license to view something until an undetermined date into the future when it may or may not be revoked. But fine. In the EULA, you did not purchase the content or the ability to view it. You purchased the ability to view it until we say you can't. I'll give you that one. How about this? Let's go to a company called Reason Studios. Reason is a popular piece of software used by a lot of people that create music. A lot of people that create beats use Reason. It is a decent piece of software. It's a fair value, in my opinion, for what you get. $500 gets you the software itself, and you can buy all of these instruments as well as effects that you can use with it. A lot of these Reason instruments you really only can use within Reason, but there are tons of instruments you can buy. It's a really, really cool piece of software that allows you to make a lot of interesting sounds with. And a lot of people like the software for that reason. Now, this is a software where people were purchasing the software with a perpetual license so that they could continue to use it. until they change their mind. Here it says offline authorization is no longer available for reason 11 and earlier, and that they can help you out if you have reason 8 with online authorization, but anything before reason 8 and you're kind of screwed. Now, reason 8 came out somewhere around 10 years ago, so this is a 10-year-old piece of software at this point. But do keep in mind that this is not a piece of software that's has to connect to the internet. We're not talking about Windows XP connecting to the internet here. We're not talking about a 15-year-old version of VSFTPD server or Android where you really need to always have the latest up-to-date version to avoid getting hacked. This is a piece of software for music production. This can be utilized on a computer that never connects to the internet. As a result, there are many people that may have purchased Reason 7 that are still using Reason 7 that have absolutely no reason to purchase a new version. What happens if their computer crashes and they need to reinstall Reason 7 utilizing the media that they had when they purchased Reason 7? They're screwed because they can't do that anymore. It's not going to work properly. And this is an email exchange that occurred between a customer and Reason, and I would just like to read it to you. I have redacted out the customer's name and email because I don't think that he wants me to display that. Your anti-consumer business choices leave me no option than to make a business choice of my own and choose to spend my money elsewhere. I want my account and all data related to it destroyed. Please notify me once the process is complete. They said they can move the license to another account, but you can't really delete it. And then here's the email that I really think is important to read. When I purchased your software, I purchased a perpetual license and did so under the reasonable assumption that maintaining an installation of the software I paid for would be a straightforward process. As of September 25th, 2023, I can no longer activate the software I paid for as you have decided that its copy protection system is no longer something you can be bothered to maintain. As such, you have effectively stolen from me as you have decided to stop honoring your side of the agreement we made when I purchased the software. You can, of course, buy the software back from me at a reasonable price, including all the rack extensions I paid for, as without Reason itself, they are worthless, and taking into account the inconvenience your misbehavior has caused me. Alternatively, you could remove the copy protection system from the software so I can continue using it as I have previously. Another option would be to provide me with a free upgrade to the earliest version that still allows online activation, which I believe is Reason version 8. Any of these solutions would demonstrate care for your customers, a desire to be an upstanding business, and the accusation of theft would no longer apply. Regards. And the response from Reason is, I'm very sorry, but I'm afraid that none of your proposed resolutions are feasible, although I suspect you likely realize this. That is just rubbing salt in the wound. Okay, so you paid full price for Reason 7. You did not pirate the software. In spite of the fact that you paid full price for the software, you can no longer install that software that you paid full price for a perpetual license. Not a temporary license, not a streaming license, not a you can only use this in my web browser with this graphics card, with this driver, with this processor, bullshit-ass Netflix license. You paid for a perpetual license to use this software, and it's not going to work anymore. Although I suspect you likely realize that none of your proposed resolutions are feasible. F you! Refunds and returns are limited to a 30-day period after purchase. You know it should also be limited to a 30-day period after purchase? Your ability to make that software stop working, you fucking prick. Your last purchase from us was in 2011. Removing the system of authorization from Reason is not a realistic proposition. Reason 8 is no longer available. His response is, I realize no such thing. What I realize is that you are choosing to not act upon any of the suggested solutions, and as such remain a company that is fine with stealing from its customers. I will never purchase or use any product from your company produces ever again, and I will actively seek to ensure that no one else I can influence does either. Does he sound salty? Yes, he does. He sounds salty. He's writing a salty email. He sounds salty in the email. He is salty because he paid money for something that is not going to be able to work anymore. He paid for a perpetual license to the software. He can't continue to use the software. They have decided to stop supporting the copy protection system that is put into that software. This copy protection system is not for the benefit of him. It's for the benefit of Reason Studios. If he had went on the high seas, he would have had a piece of software that he could continuously install from now until the end of time. This piece of software that I purchased over here, I bought this shit, I forget if it was 2001 or 2002. It's been a while, excuse my memory. I bought this thing over 20 years ago. If I wanted to install it, it would still work. There is nothing stopping me from using this software that I purchased over 20 years ago. Now, would I want to connect that software to the internet with my personal data on it? Probably not. Probably not. But this is not a piece of software that needs to be connected to the internet to work. This is not a piece of software where I am seriously concerned about not having security patches. This is not a type of software where you would have to be crazy to be using an old version. One of the things that I learned when I worked at Avatar Studios back in 2007 and 2008, and also worked at a lot of smaller studios across New York City back in 2008 and 2009, is that some of the best producers that you will ever meet are using old-ass versions of software. Like, I know people that in 2010 were still using Logic back when it was owned by eMagic, not by Apple. There are people that I know that today are using Logic Pro 7 with a Power Mac G5 from 2004 or 5. And the reason for this is you have these people that get really into the zone. And when they have everything set up exactly the way that they like, and workflow is so important to them. Having a creative workflow where everything is set up in a certain way, they know where everything is, they know what everything's going to sound like, is important to them. They don't want to change. They don't want to upgrade. They don't want to do anything that's going to interrupt the creative process. They will have 3 clones of that hard drive in their closet. They will have 3 of those Power Mac G5s ready to go in case one dies in their closet because they have a system that works for them. And many of these people are not random no-talent hacks. They're people that have multi-platinum selling records. I still know the person that did 50 Cent's Magic Stick that was using a computer that was 15 years old with software that was over 10 years old because it worked for him and there was absolutely no reason for him to change what worked. There was nothing to gain, but everything to lose. He had all the sound, he had everything you wanted. Why change it? There are many people that are going to want to use old versions of their software, and some of those people that have old versions of their software might not have done clones of their disk drive so that if their operating system drive fails, they can just back up from a clone rather than have to reinstall their software. And most people assume that when they purchase software, when they pay the full asking price on the website, and they get a box in the mail, that means they can reinstall that software whenever they want. The idea that you could pay $500 for a piece of software for a perpetual lifetime license and have that software not be installable at some point into the future with no option from the company to have the copy protection removed, to be upgraded to a version, even if it's an old version that actually works, is insane. From Reason's point of view, perhaps removing the copy protection from their software is insane. Why would we remove the copy protection? Because you stopped supporting it. You asshole. The customer has not changed the terms of the agreement. You did. The customer did not decide that he's going to use a different computer that is not compatible with your copy protection software. The customer is not running some sort of crazy setup that requires you remove the copy protection part of the code. You decided that it's not going to work anymore. Because you decided it's not going to work anymore, he's asking you to make that work. Anybody who finds themselves in this situation where they have paid full price for a piece of software, for a perpetual license, who has not broken the terms of use or sale at all, when they find themselves in a situation where that software will no longer work, you are not only in the right, dare I say it, you are morally and ethically obligated to go to the high seas to get a copy of that software because you paid for it. You gave them the money already. You paid them for a perpetual license. They decided to take that away from you. Is that your fault or is that theirs? If you had gone the high seas for this software 12 years ago, rather than pay them $500 for it, you would have had a better experience than you did paying for it. Because had you went to the high seas for that software would still work. That software would work in 2013, it would work in 2023, it would work in 2093 with no worries about activation or activation servers. Because when you go to the high seas, they have their own way of dealing with activation, if you know what I'm saying. This is one of the reasons that people pirate. They pirate because in spite of the fact that they have paid full price, they have their content taken away from them. They get their content in lower quality than what was advertised, and in some cases, they just have the entire piece of software taken away from them in spite of the fact that they paid the full price for it. As long as companies see no problem with this, as long as companies are willing to stick their finger in the wound while it's still bleeding and say shit like, I'm afraid none of your proposed resolutions are feasible, I suspect you likely realize this. You know what you're doing? You're encouraging legions of people to pirate your software because you're sending the message that when they pay you, they will get a worse experience than when they don't. I'm not expecting you to actually compete with free. If somebody out there is willing to steal a Mercedes S580 and give me that Mercedes S580, I'm not expecting a Honda dealership to give me a Mercedes S580 class vehicle for the $10,000 that I'm looking to give them for a used Accord. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you are going out of your way to insert something into your software or your hardware that makes the experience worse for somebody that paid, specifically because they chose to go the route of paying you. It's not that like we can't provide this because there's no way I can give you an S580 class vehicle for $10,000, but like where you're literally inserting something into the software that gives a worse experience to the people who pay, you're encouraging piracy. If, again, look at that Netflix example. I'm getting 720p not because my hardware is not good enough. I'm getting 720p because they and the content rights holders have explicitly decided to make my experience suck unless I use a very specific controlled environment. That was a decision that had to be made. That was a choice. Making their content work at 4K on a Pentium 3, that's not a choice. That's just the reality of life. It's not going to work if I try to use a Pentium 3 to stream a 4K show. Them putting something in there that refuses to give me that stream that my computer is able to play, that's a choice. Conversely, Reason Studios deciding that they are not going to help this customer at all, in spite of the fact that he has not changed his software, he has not changed the terms of the agreement. He simply wants to continue using the software he already bought and paid for on the system that he intended to utilize it on, and cannot do that because they have inserted a copy protection system that makes that impossible, but it wouldn't be impossible if he decided not to pay them, is why people will choose piracy. The same way that Necron will always exist in Final Fantasy IX as long as there is life in the universe, piracy will continue to exist as long as companies continue to act in these anti-consumer garbage ways. As long as there's somebody willing to type out that sassy-ass email at the side of their mouth, and you know this isn't realistic, there's somebody out there who will be happy of an ear-to-ear grin figuring out how to break your copy protection and pirate your software. The person who wrote this response sees no problem with this response. They see nothing wrong with it. I think that it's up to us as customers to demonstrate to companies like this why there's something wrong with these types of responses, why there's something wrong with showing this level of disregard for people who have given you money when you decide that you no longer wish to provide them with that which they paid for, when you decide that you wish to take it away. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. Me personally, I don't purchase my audio software, nor do I pirate it. I use Linux. I don't have the option to do any of the above. I used to actually purchase my plugins back in the day. I purchased URS Channel Strip Flow. It was something like $250 or $500 back in 2007. That thing was an awesome plugin. Now I use Linux where, again, there's a bunch of free open source GPL licensed plugins that are great. But you can't really use them in anything. Kdenlive is a video editor, no audio-video plugins. If you were to use something like DaVinci Resolve, which is what I use over here, DaVinci Resolve does not actually work with any of those plugins. Like, it says it works with VST plugins, but that's a meme. Carla or Ardor will work with those plugins, but almost every video piece of software you use doesn't. The only one that shows up is Carla, and it says fail to load. There's, you could do with Linux is you could process your video, edit your video, and then process your audio separately in another program, and I'm not doing that. So I use the plugins that are built into DaVinci Resolve, which are not the best. That's why sometimes you hear a little bit of clipping that you didn't hear back when I used a Windows computer and was able to use the plugins that I purchased and paid for, but that would require I use Windows. And I'm one of those masochists that actually uses Linux by choice. Yes, I do hate myself enough to use Linux as a daily driver and deal with the fact that most things that I want to work just don't work. But I use this, and it kind of works for me. I actually paid for DaVinci Resolve. This is DaVinci Resolve Studio. It is a great piece of software that I use because it actually, again, totally worth the $300 to have a video editor that never crashes in Linux. I highly suggest you check this out if you're doing any sort of video production on Linux. They don't actually pay me for this. I really appreciate paying for software that actually works and does not crash in Linux. Again, I tried even in Windows, getting a video editor and not crash. My God, if you just look at something like Barnacles' old Twitter feed, it's crash after crash after crash after crash when it comes to stuff like Premiere Pro. I don't know why people use Premiere. DaVinci Resolve, like 3 or 4 years in Linux, not a single crash. Good software. Anyway, that's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. Lastly, if anybody here is listening from the Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve development team, if you figure out how to actually make these audio plugins work in Linux the way they work in Carla and Ardor and every other program, I will buy your software 3 times over again. And I will also include your software in sponsored videos on this channel without you paying a dime. It would be really cool to be able to use that stuff. But anyway, this video is kind of getting long-winded at this point. I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.